Hi, I'm Steve Moriarty from Moriarty's Gem Art. In this lesson we're going to cut this citrine in a standard round brilliant. We have it preformed and ready to go. So I'll put it in the machine, tighten up the set screw, tighten up the nut here, and I've set the machine up with a 320 diamond lap to start with. There's still quite a bit of material to cut off, so we use a little coarser lap. So it's in the machine, so the first thing we have to do is set the angle. We're going to use the long and steel meat point faceting design. I like it better, and I think you'll find it easier to cut in the manner that they cut. They do start with the girdle facets first, or the break facets, and then cut the mains. You know, the mains are always the facet that produce the culet of the stone. So I've chosen this on-stack version of a standard round brilliant that's in long and steel. I've chosen it for a couple of reasons. I think it'll be easier for you to cut, and I like the 80% break facets. Now in this design there's two sets of facets. One are the main facets, which is P3 in this design. Now those are nice and thin. The mains always form the culet of the gem, and the other facets, number one, are the break facets, which form the girdle. So in this design, because our culet angle for quartz is 43, our design angle we're going to use is 43. And P1 is the break facets, they'll be at 44.1. This is the girdle at 90 degrees, and this is the mains at 43 degrees. So these are the numbers you're going to set for each. P1 is going to be this 16 facets that form the girdle. So our goal, once we get this facet set up right, is for it to end up at 0. So to start cutting, we're going to want to lower the mast to where we're down to, say, 30. And then we're going to set the index, which it gives us the numbers, and it's 93.87. So 93 is here. These on this machine, it's these lines are every 3 indexes. So we're on 93. We're going to set it on the lap, and I've chosen a little coarser lap. This is about a 320 because I have quite a bit of material to remove. We'll start the machine up. Turn the water on. And not too hard a pressure, and it's very important that you hold the stone. Do not hold the dop, because you'll break the stone free if you push here. So you want to be pushing on the stone only. So it's barely done anything. It's cut over here. So what we have to do is get all these facets to end at a center point up here. So we'll move the mast down a little more. Fairly heavy pressure, not excessive. And we still have a ways to go before we hit center. So to get a better idea where center is, if we go and turn to the exact opposite facet, we can start cutting it. And you'll see this is not moving at all yet, so we got a ways to go. The other side we cut to 0, so we'll cut this one to 0. And 0 not only gives you a reference point, it also is where the angle you set, the 44.1, is accurately at 44.1. And if you sweep the lap, you'll get better wear on your lap. You want to wear out one spot. And when you're reading the dial gauge, you want to come back to approximately the same spot when you read it and try and be using approximately the same kind of pressure. So we've still got a ways to go before we do hit center. So we'll set this back down to 30 or so. And now's the time to look more often because you don't want to overcut it and waste material. And I'm currently at 20 on the gauge, so I'm going to go to the opposite facet again and cut to that same place, 20. I'm going to check again, and they still don't quite meet. So again, I'm at 20, so I can continue to cut to 0. Quick check at 10, and we're pretty close, so actually I'm going to go ahead and move it to close to 0. 1 or 2, and then cut to 0. And then go do the opposite facet again. And it looks like we've met, possibly. They are together, but are they together at the center point is the only question. So now that we have a 0 set, we can go around and cut all the numbers and find whether we've actually come to a point at the cubit. So we've got 2 facets that are cut to 0. So now we're going to go ahead and cut the other 14 facets. And hopefully we have a center point, and then we can proceed to Pavilion 2. So we just continue and cut them all to 0. Try and use about the same pressure. I'm going to trust that the machine is accurate enough to get me close, so I'm not even going to look. I'm just going to cut them all. So we do have a center point, The facets aren't quite perfect, but the next step will get them all just to cut right to the center point. We're going to change the lap now to the Nubon 325 and recut these facets. So now we've changed to the Nubon 325, and you might ask why I go from a 300 to a 325 and not something finer, but this actually cuts very fine. It cuts maybe like 1,000 grit. This 325 produces a very smooth surface. So I've looked at the stone, and I'm going to pick the facet that is overcut the most or cut the deepest into the culet, and I'm going to start there and recut it. I'm going to again set close to 0. And I'm going to set it just a little above 0 and then cut it to 0. Not quite as much pressure this time. So I've cut the 0, but I haven't quite got this lap to cut all the way to the culet. So I'm going to reset it and set to maybe 3 or 4 on the dial over here, so I can cut a little deeper and continue to cut. And once I'm to 0, we'll take a look at it. And now I think I've got all the way to the culet. At this point, you want to look and make sure that the surface is smooth and doesn't have deep pits. If it has pits, you're going to want to cut a little deeper, because the polishing, it's difficult to take pits out of this or deep scratches. So you may want to start using this earlier in the cutting process, because I prefer to use the visor over a loop as long as I can, which through most of the cutting process I find that the visor is enough magnification and it's much quicker than using a loop. So now that we've got most of the scratches out of this and it is set to 0, I can start using 0 again to recut the facets, although I'm going to look a little more often and see how it's coming along, because you still can't totally trust the machine. So we're a lot closer now. Everything is fairly close to the culet. I'll have to go around one more time and adjust a few facets. Some of them are just coming up a little short, and I'll just go over those and cut them a little deeper until they all match at the culet. So I'm not going to adjust the machine height or anything. I'm just going to find the facets that don't quite go all the way up to the culet and cut them just a little deeper. may have to go around a couple of times and do this till you get it right. So after twice around the stone, checking for which facets I'd cut short on, I now have everything going to the culet pretty accurately. So the next step is to cut the girdle. And in this case, you can see there are areas I have no girdle left. So I'm going to pick the place I think is the greatest problem, which is probably right here, and start cutting there and try and get enough material for a girdle and try to estimate when I have enough material for the girdle and the crown of the stone. So I've changed back to the 320 lap, turn the water on. Now we're going to be cutting at the girdle at 90 degrees, so we have to set it at 90, and this back to 0, so we're 90 degrees. Move the mast back, move this out of the way so we can get to the lap. Check, make sure I'm on the right index, which will be the same index as you just used. And find my problem area again. So I want to start there. So again, we're gonna lower the mast while we're holding it on 0. We're on 0 here. And I'm going to crank the mast down until it starts cutting and take it up a little ways, maybe up to 20. Again, each machine is going to be different, so this isn't going to be accurate for every machine. But we'll start cutting and start checking, and actually I don't want to go much further than that. So I'm going to put it back down there and put this back to near 0. Now I've cut into the girdle, probably not enough yet, because that's not enough for a crown. That's close. But we'll go around once and see what it looks like just at that point. So you can do this fairly quickly. This could be first time around. Cut into 0. Pretty much gone around once. Everywhere I do have enough for a girdle, and likely this widest place here is how much I have for a crown. So close to enough for a crown, but I'm probably going to take it a little more. And I'm going to change over to the new bond lap. So I'm guessing that I don't have enough for a crown yet, so I'm going to cut a little further on the Dubon lap, and it'll give me a relatively bright finish for the girdle. So again, you hold it down and lower the mast until this moves. I'm going to take it to about 5, get my water running. So the depth of the girdle is probably something I should measure and try and do a percentage, but I've always done it by eye, and it seems to have worked for me. But you might want to learn what the proportions of the crown and the pavilion are, and maybe some measurements might help you. So now I've kind of determined where I think the depth of the girdle is to give me enough crown. So I'm going to go ahead and set it back to 0. Not going to really trust it this time, but I'm going to try and make the lines in the girdle meet the lines I've cut in the pavilion. And 0 will be a good reference for me, so I know I'm getting close to where I should be. Nope, out of water. Any indicator like this dial gauge you can't trust completely. But it's helpful because the more times you look at the stone, the slower you're going to cut. Each time you pick it up, you could have cut another facet in the time it took you to look at it. So I'm actually going lower than 0 to get this one right. So it's helpful, but not 100% accurate. I use the previous facet as a reference as to how deep I cut, and kind of look before you're 1 or 2 lines on this gauge before you think it's going to be accurate. You stop a little short and take a look, because each facet just seems to be different. Okay, so I've gone around the stone and you can see where the facets don't quite meet right here. And so what I'm going to do now, I was cutting this direction, so now I'm going to go in reverse. You know, what happens here is you overcut, or in this case undercut, just a little teeny bit on every facet, and you end up with that much difference when you get around to this side. So now I'll go back the other way and cut a little bit extra until I finally feel that they all meet again. Okay, so now I've finished the girdle and I'm happy with the meats on it. So now we're going to go to the main facets, which is P3, and it's going to cut at the main angle, which is 43 degrees. There'll be 8 facets. So we raise the head on the mast, We set this to 40 and 3. Find the right index, which we'll be doing basically every 12 indexes, so it'll be 96, 12, 24, 36, 48, 60, 72, 84, and 96. So we're going to lower it to the lap, and we're just going to touch it to start with. We're going to want to be somewhere close to 0, because this isn't much of a facet. We're not going to be cutting much. Slowly take it down, and I'm holding it somewhere close to 0. And as soon as it touches, now we want to take a look and make sure things look good. So it has started cutting near the culet. It's a very fine cut, so you may not be able to see it. So it's cutting the right spot anyway, so I'll cut a little more. And you can keep cutting as long as you don't go past the girdle, and then we can decide whether the facet is large enough. Now I want to go back and I'm close, so I'm going to get it set on 0 again. Still a little high, get it down to 0 so I know I'm at 43 degrees. And that's pretty much my first facet. Okay, this is our culet facet, and we just got to cut 7 more of them, and then it's on to polish. So the primary reference point here is at the girdle, because this is cutting from the culet down to the girdle. So once you hit the girdle is where you want to stop. So I've got all the facets cut now. If you are off a very slight bit, you can make adjustments when you polish. You just can't go very far, but slight adjustments are possible during polish. But thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Our next video will be on polishing the facets we've just cut.